Hello.
Hello, everybody.
I don't have a prepared statement. I'm just here to see if you have any questions you want to ask me, so please. I think the discussion is centering around our shared frustration that the federal government continues to intervene in our areas of jurisdiction, continues to try to dictate how we operate in our programs and policies, and yet they fail in their areas of jurisdiction. That's what a lot of the conversation is that when the federal government often comes calling with an offer to help, it's meager and it has a lot of strings attached. But meanwhile, we've got a lot of big issues that the federal government needs to deal with. For instance, on the issue of Indigenous health, which is an area where they are completely failing Indigenous communities and supporting them in urban environments, as well as supporting them with the mental health and addiction crisis. And so those are, I think, a couple of the reasons why we're deciding to work towards trying to find some best practices among the provinces, but also push back and make sure that the federal government is meeting its obligations as well.
We've heard today that RNs in Alberta, some of them are paid enormous amounts of overtime, $300,000, $500,000. Have you heard about this? What's your reaction?
In Alberta, we have some of the lowest rates of nurses wanting to work full-time. We were at the nursing conference this morning, and 36% of the workforce in our nursing population in Alberta is full-time. The rest are part-time and casual. And so what has happened is there's a dynamic that's been created that because nurses keep getting asked to do overtime, they want to work part-time and casual, and as a result, we're ending up paying more and more overtime. So we have to look at some innovative approaches where we can encourage nurses and reward those who choose to work full-time hours and make sure that we've got enough staffing. That's one of the things that I'm picking up from some of the other provinces, that being able to have some flexibility in the collective agreement so that we can negotiate having differentials for weekend shifts, differentials for evening shifts, encouragement for full-time work. That I think it will ultimately lead to better working conditions overall. But Alberta has one of the biggest problems when I look across the country at failing to create an environment in the workforce that nurses want to be in. And I can say that because I'm new to it. And I identified this problem when I first got elected. It's why I dismissed the Alberta Health Services Board and brought in an official administrator, because enough is enough. We've got to start dealing with these working conditions. We've got to start making Alberta Health Services and our hospitals the very best place for people to work, as opposed to continuing to see that we're attracting people in, we're burning them out, and they're leaving. That's the dynamic that we have to turn around. Well, look, I mean, the increase in healthcare costs is increasing at a rate that's more rapid than the federal government is meeting us in contributions. I mean, obviously, I think we got $500 million. That's a significant amount of money, but we spend $27 billion a year or so in healthcare. It's our biggest ticket item, and so on the margins, yes, it's having an impact. But we need to make sure that we're addressing some pretty big areas of healthcare. One is establishing a robust primary care system that includes team practice with not just doctors but also nurse practitioners, LPNs, and other allied health professionals. Also having a robust continuing care and home care system so that there are alternative ways for people to be able to get the care they need. We're also expanding, and we met with the pharmacists last night as well. They're grateful that Alberta has expanded the scope for pharmacy to do prescriptions and also start creating some primary care opportunities as well. So we have to make sure that we're doing reforms that are going to address the needs of our population. And if the federal government wants to help us cost share on those, we're always grateful for the support. But I don't want to overstate their contribution, because it's a fairly small part of the overall amount that we spend on healthcare.
And yet there's a rally for public health care outside today. How much of that is private care that you're talking about?
What do you mean by private?
Well, I mean, I've heard you talk about doctor clinics. Are those privately run clinics that would ease the load? Or are you committing to public?
Every doctor's office is a privately run corporation that's publicly funded. So what are you referring to then? Well, we're not doing that. We're not doing that. We're increasing the capacity by having doctor-run surgical centres that are outside the hospital system. We have about 60,000 of our 300,000 surgeries that are in these doctor-run surgical centres, 100% publicly funded, 100% publicly paid. No one pays out of pocket, and it just expands the capacity, and it also increases the specialization and the amount that we're able to do. We're also expanding our existing hospital operating rooms in our publicly owned facilities so that we can increase the capacity there as well. But no one's paying out of pocket for medically necessary care in Alberta. Well, I guess this is just it. Most of what we're talking about doesn't come around to continuing to ask the government for more money at the federal level. Part of it is having the federal government work with us to on the things that we need, which is a streamlined process for recruiting people from abroad, having them come into our system, into the professions that we need. Once they are identified as having the credentials that they need, being able to move seamlessly between the provinces. And so those are the kind of things that we would want to use the federal government's assistance on, is the recruitment, retention, as well as the international recognition. And they are principally responsible when it comes to immigration and bringing people into the country, which is why they play a crucial role on that. We've all been able to negotiate some arrangements that have allowed for us to be able to bring in new professionals. We've got an MOU with the Philippines, for instance, where we're recruiting LPNs directly and providing a bridge program to be able to get them into the system. Atlantic Canada has a wonderful approach where you can get automatic recognition and sharing of credentials across their entire region. They're also reaching out internationally to be able to recruit doctors seamlessly from the UK, New Zealand, Australia, US, 7 jurisdictions. I think we'll want to take a closer look at that to see if we can do the same thing. So I would hope that the federal government would assist us in our efforts at recruitment, because I think that we're seeing some great innovation at the provincial level, and that's, I think, where the discussion is going. I think that it turned out to be a very long and frustrating process for the premiers to put so much effort into trying to get a health accord that would have the federal government meet its historic commitment of getting up to 35% and have it essentially fail. And so I think we're looking at trying to find some more practical ways that we can address the issues that we need that go beyond the issue of health funding.
And we'll go from the left.
Yeah, we signed it in principle, and we had an election, and I have a new health minister, and so we're working with them on being able to identify on the bilateral agreements the areas that it's going to go. But we didn't have a disagreement on the issues that they identified for their priorities. Mental health and addiction, that's an area of interest for us, making sure that we've got particularly programs for young people. That's an area of interest for us, making sure that we're supporting Indigenous health. That's important, developing out primary care. So I think that you'll find that we are already well advanced on a lot of the things that the federal government identified as their areas of priority. So I don't see that those are going to be difficult negotiations.
And we have time for two more.
The proposition of Affordability regarding Bombardier.
I don't know what the proposal was.
Okay, so Affordability didn't bring this subject to the table.
The Bombardier?
Yes.
No.
He's bringing to the table tomorrow. He's calling on the federal government and Premier support to ask the federal government to open up the procurement process so that it's competitive and would include the Quebec-based company Bombardier, because right now the federal government's sole sourcing a contract going to replace surveillance planes, but they have not made a final decision. Do you have any thoughts on that?
Look, we're building out our own aviation industry by being able to attract de Havilland, and we're working with other aviation companies to invest in our province, because we think we're just providing a great business environment for them to work in. And so I'll leave it to Mr. Legault to talk about the things that he thinks are important for the federal government, but we don't need the federal government's help on that.
And we'll take, we're taking one more question. We're going to go back here, and then we have to get back to the meeting. Thank you.
I can talk to you about emissions for a second. It's
Sure.
The Atlantic provinces are bringing to the table this week. They don't like the federal government's new clean fuel standards. You just met with the Prime Minister last week about emissions, and that was one of the topics, emissions reductions plans. Are you talking to the Atlantic provinces at all? Is there trying to be a united front at the Premier's table with the federal government on their
Here's where I think all of the premiers agree, that setting an emissions reduction target of carbon neutrality by 2050 That seems like a reasonable time frame. We've got a number of industries that are working towards that time frame. And if we can work collaboratively towards that, I don't think you'll find any disagreement among the provinces or the federal government. The problem is the federal government is trying to regulate in areas they know nothing about. They have no understanding of the electricity system, which is why constitutionally it goes to the provinces. We each have geographic differences and different starting points, and so having a one-size-fits-all doesn't work. They're also trying to regulate in another area they have no understanding of, which is the oil and natural gas industry. There's a reason why resources were left to the provinces in the Constitution, is because each province has its own endowment, and we have the ability to determine the pace and scale of the development. So the problem that we have with the federal government is not the overarching objective of 2050, it's that they're putting unrealistic targets in place in the interim that is, in our case, resulting in what would look like to me a production cap. And in the case of all of the provinces who have hydrocarbons on their power grid or that they're reliant on for transportation fuel, it's creating a crushing burden on our people for affordability. It's also creating instability and unreliability. The number one job that we have to do is make sure that our people have reliable and affordable energy. And then also achieving emissions reductions that are going to be achievable in the long term. So that's where I think the dispute is. It's not the end goal, it's the unrealistic expectations that the federal government is putting on us in the meantime, and the crushing extra burden of the extra costs that they're putting on our people.
Are you working to create a united front? Is there talk about that at the table today?
Everyone has, different starting points, as I said. I mean, for some jurisdictions, it's not as difficult. Manitoba, Quebec, British Columbia, Ontario, they all have relatively green power grids just because of historically how they developed. And so some of these targets are a lot easier for them to reach, and electrification is a lot easier for them. A province like mine that starts with, we had most of our power was coal up until a few years ago. We took great effort to phase out coal at great cost, which our people are still paying for, and then they've moved the goalposts on us again, wanting us to phase out natural gas. So those are the frustrations that we have, is that it seems like as we start making progress, we continue to have the goalposts moving, and it's an area that the federal government really doesn't seem to understand the impact on each region. So what we're encouraging is let each region develop its own agreement with the federal government to achieve the 2050 target. And just let's allow for a little differentiation between the provinces, because everyone's going to get there. We're just going to get there at different paces and in different ways.
And that's all the time we're going to have for questions. We have to get back to
Cost of living, obviously, this is something that we've heard all the premiers talk about. What are you hoping comes from these meetings to deal with that issue in your own province?
Well, look, I mean, the federal government has created this cost of living problem with the overspending, the borrowing, the debt, and the fact that we're now in the middle of an inflation crisis. And then on top of that, they are increasing the cost of everything by increasing carbon taxes, bringing through clean fuel standards, and then continuing to push the envelope on emissions reductions that are expensive. So we need a break. The Russian invasion of Ukraine changed the dynamic, and countries around the world are beginning to understand that you need to have all of it. You need to have not just emissions reduction, but also reliability and affordability. So we have called for the federal government to just stop continuing to put additional costs on our consumers. We would love to see an end to the retail carbon tax, or a reprieve from it. There's certainly a reprieve from the increases on that. And I think you saw the Atlantic provinces, they're getting crushed by the clean fuel standards. We also see that there's a difference in how the carbon tax is levied across the country. Quebec is going to ultimately pay a lot less than everyone else, and it was supposed to be a floor price. I mean, that seems a bit unfair, that some provinces have a higher burden than others. So these are going to be ongoing issues that we have to talk to the federal government about. But if they were serious about affordability, what they would do is they would stop increasing the cost of everything. And if they were concerned about the affordability in Alberta, and they would end the port strike as well. I might as well just say that. Because if this was a strike that was taking place in Port of Montreal, it would be over already. And we're now 10 days into a strike. We're hearing that our producers are having to shut down and roll back their production. I'm hearing that across the board, whether it's in agriculture or whether it's in oil, and this is going to have a huge impact on supply chains. So those are the kind of things the federal government does that just makes things worse, and that's going to just increase the cost of everything in our province if it doesn't get resolved very soon. So thanks, everybody.